Okay, cool. We are recording now. Cool. So let's kind of get into it. First, a little bit about our lab and what I do, and also what Alex does. He's also in this chat, who's also in our lab as a PhD student. I'm a second-year PhD student. I've actually been working in the lab for about 3.5 years now. So since I've been an undergrad. But our lab focuses on developing new nano-based contrast agents and imaging strategies for primarily detection of cancer. And I'll kind of get into what nanoparticles are and why they're important as well. We do this with a variety of different imaging methodologies or just types of imaging devices. So we work with MRI, CT, SPECT, and PET, which are both radio-based imaging strategies. We work with fluorescence microscopy, a little bit with ultrasound, some photoacoustic, and also a lot of Raman imaging, which is what our lab is primarily known for. Let's get into it a little bit. So what is a nanoparticle? Has anybody heard of what a nanoparticle is before? I've heard of like nanofabrication. I will wait for an answer. I'm cool. I'm hanging out. You know what microprocessors are? Computers? Anything? All right. Well, anyways, nanoparticles are basically just defined by their size. So the nanoscale is something that we refer to a lot. And nanoscale is really just a range of measurements in the nanometer world. So we have this kind of scale over on the right side, and you kind of see the differences in kind of the scales of different things. There's a micron scale, which is kind of in the cellular regime. A lot of cells are primarily between 5 and say 40, sometimes a little bit larger microns. And then you take a step down into the nanometer scale. So 1 nanometer is 1,000th of a micron. It's if you want a comparison, a millimeter is 1,000th of a meter. So that's kind of the same scale difference that we're talking about when we're talking about nanoparticles in cells. So I thought this was kind of handy because when I first started doing this work, I had no idea what a nanoparticle really meant, and it's really just defined by size. So you can see on the right here, this is kind of the typical size. It's a little bit larger than a normal blood cell. Normal blood cells are between like 7 and 9 microns in diameter. It's kind of this cool little donut shape. And you can see the gold nanoparticle here is 100 nanometers. So this image isn't quite to scale, but the scale bars are. But a good way to think about the kind of size difference is if you have a basketball, which I'm sure everyone's seen before, they're around 10 inches in diameter, which is pretty close to 250 millimeters. And then if you know what a fly is, I hope, about a half of a fly is kind of the scale of a nanoparticle compared to a basketball. So that's kind of the size scales that we're working with. And why is this relevant? Why am I talking about sizes at all? So nanoparticles are quite interesting because they're a lot larger than other molecules and other biologicals that we typically work with. So you can see here, this is a 20 nanometer gold nanoparticle, and then compared to an antibody, which is a rather large biological molecule, it's about, for 20 nanometers, about double in size. Nanoparticles can go from what we typically think of as from 1 nanometer up to 1,000 nanometers or 1 micron. So this is kind of a smaller end of the spectrum for nanoparticles. But then you kind of step down and you can see some albumin, which is another blood molecule. You can have smaller iron oxide nanoparticles, and then a single peptide is only about 1 micron in diameter. And then another kind of like biological molecule, salicylic acid, is only 0.5 nanometers. And then below this, when we talk about, say, single molecules or atoms, we're talking about angstroms, which is 1,000th of a nanometer. So this is kind of a cool rendering, and this is kind of an introduction to actually what you can do in CAD, because this image was rendered in a computer-aided design program. It's called Blender. So why do we care about nanoparticles? Because they're bigger, there's a variety of different cool properties that they can have, but they're also very cool because they're small. So when we talk about bulk material, which is kind of on a bigger scale, they don't have the same properties as nanomaterials. Specifically for what I work with, which is gold nanoparticles, the smaller size has a really kind of allows them to have very cool photonic properties. Can't talk today. Photonic properties, and then we can also conjugate a bunch of different things to the surface of these nanoparticles. So let's say that you wanted to treat cancer. but you also wanted to find where the cancer is because you don't know exactly where in the body it's gone. You can actually functionalize these nanoparticles with both, say, a chemotherapeutic agent to treat the cancer, but then also, say, an imaging agent so you can find the cancer at the same time, which is super powerful. And because they have so many binding sites compared to, say, a single molecule, so going back here, instead of having one single item to like look at the cancer with, you can combine a bunch of them on the surface, which means that the contrast is a lot brighter with nanoparticles. And you can pretty much conjugate anything you want in the world to the nanoparticles. There's a lot of really cool syntheses that you can do, and just they're very fun to work with, and they can do a lot of cool things. So some of the stuff that I work on, this is in vivo imaging. So I don't know if you guys gone over this, but in vivo basically just means in the body. So what this is a blood vessel in an ear of a model animal. And these little white specks, I don't know how it's showing up on your screen, are actually gold nanoparticles free flowing in the vasculature. And we can do this in real time. So if, I mean, you're not allowed to, but I've thought about it. Putting your arm up against this microscope we're working with, you could actually see the blood cells and the nanoparticles flowing through your body in real time, which is pretty powerful. And what we seem to do in our lab is to use these kind of new technologies we're developing to answer, say, fundamental questions about how nanoparticles work, and then also how the body works and how cancer works. This is kind of another example of what we can do with some of the imaging technologies we make with nanoparticles. This is actually a section of a liver, and the red spots are gold nanoparticles. And then this is actually rendered in 3D because we took 3D sections of the liver. So we can see 3D localization of nanoparticles within a cellular structure. And we can do cool flips, you know, to flex on people. So that's kind of fun. So kind of getting into what the bulk of my talk, because I just want to give a little intro about what I do. At the end of the talk too, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I actually got into a PhD in biomedical engineering and kind of what that means to me, at least. But before that, let's go into what is CAD. So CAD is really just computer-aided design. And basically that means that you're using a computer to design something. That's really all it is. So on kind of a basic level, you're going from, say, a 2D drawing of something and extruding it or creating a 3D part from that. That's kind of how I think about the workflow. So a lot of different types of people use that. When you talk about 2D, you might think about house plans and an architect working in that. All those people use CAD. And then 3D is something where you're actually, say, in mechanical engineering, creating a part like a wing, or in this case, and this is a very complicated kind of rendering, but this is actually an entire machine to make N95 masks for code first responders, rendered in 3D to exact part accuracies. And so that's really powerful because if you think about, okay, well, I want to make N95 masks, so I need a machine to do it. That machine is going to have potentially 1 million parts, each individually with their own tolerances and their own fit. And you have to somehow figure out how to get all of these different things together and fit without having to like go back to the drawing board. Because you can imagine if you just kind of sketch this out on a piece of paper and something doesn't fit, you might have to redesign whole parts. So CAD is kind of a way that we can make sure that the parts that we design are actually able to work with each other. Let's kind of get into it. Yeah, so who uses CAD? A lot of the times, and this is what I thought when I first got into CAD modeling, was that the only people who used it were mechanical engineers. It's like, okay, I'm at Boeing, I want to create a wing, I want to model that wing, I want to model the stresses on that wing, so that's what I'm going to do. In reality, CAD is actually used by a lot of different types of people. Obviously, biomedical engineers, this is kind of a rendering of an artificial hand that people have created. Graphic artists use CAD to create models and to animate things. And architects use it, I was talking about, to create buildings and structures, and then also to show them to clients and to show them to review boards. So, a little aside, my dog benefits from CAD because this little sad little cone that he's wearing was actually created in CAD initially to be made on the machine and to make the model to stamp out these plastic sheets in CAD. So he's obviously not too stoked on that, but it's kind of what it is right now. So I want to give you guys kind of an example of like how you can get started with CAD, because when I started, I actually took a course in college because when I had worked previously as a mechanical engineer, the licenses that we used were exceedingly expensive because they're something that you use forever. So for SolidWorks, for instance, a full subscription for someone is over $5,000, which is just not approachable for most people. And there's a reason for that, and it's because it's a standard in the industry. It has a pretty crazy amount of features. Like you can see some of the stress modeling in this photo that you can do in SolidWorks, which is quite cool. But there's actually a free, or I guess somewhat free version for students if you're interested in learning from SolidWorks. It's only about $100 for a year, but I believe for some high schools you can actually get a free copy of SolidWorks, which is pretty awesome. So that's one option. My other recommendation for the free version of SolidWorks, or a free version, is this thing called Fusion 360. It's a copy of SolidWorks, but it's actually completely free, and it's really awesome. It's not too say in depth. You don't have to know a bunch about modeling in order to get into it, and there's so many resources online. I linked this intro video if you guys are interested in doing it. I'm not going to go into them because they're quite long, but it's something where if you want to like learn a little bit more about it, and I'm not very good at teaching CAD, it's a good place to start. The other option, and something that I've been learning more recently, is a thing called Blender. So Blender is probably one of the most powerful programs you can use. It's free as well, which is insane. So people use this for VFX, animation. You can sculpt in 3D using it, and it's free, which is absolutely incredible. Well, actually, I'll show you some of the things you can do in Blender. Pretty cool. And then last thing is, and I'll actually show you this, is GrabCAD. So if you're like, okay, how am I going to get into modeling? Well, you can go to GrabCAD, and these people, it's an online resource, or say like you wanted to find a car. So let's just say I want a BMW X1. Oh, well, wow, that's a terrible example. I should have researched this before. Let's say, what do you guys want? What do you guys want to find? What do you want to see in 3D? Alexis, I'm going to call you out.
Yeah, Hannah, come on.
Anything. I guess a Porsche.
Porsche. So you can find an old 386 Speedster. Download this file. Let's make sure it's in the right format, actually. Yeah, I got an STL. And I'll talk a little bit about what these photos are in a second compared to what 3D models are, because there actually is a difference between these two things. Come on. It's about to take a second. These files are quite large. Sorry, this should have been planned better, but we're just winging it. Where is SolidWorks? Sorry, quick intermission.
If you click on name at the top left, then it'll
Yeah.
go back. Yeah.
Okay.
This happens.
Oh my God.
This happens to SolidWorks all the time, guys. Just FYI, it happens to mine all the time at least.
What is going on? Yeah, I had a fresh install too. Oh Lord. Okay. Well, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. Well, let me show you something a little more simple because it was a really big program. But I rendered a little Mac computer. Just for fun. So there's something that you can just do for fun, and I like playing around in SolidWorks because it feels like adult Legos. Honestly, that's kind of how I think about it. But you can kind of see we're going from these sketches in here. So we're seeing this screen sketch in 2D, and then we're extruding it into 3D, into a 3D model. So from that, and into the actual 3D thing. So you might think this is pretty cool. However, it kind of looks bare. There's no textures. It doesn't look like a real item, and you see some of those photos of the Porsches we were just looking at. You're like, oh wow, that looks amazing. There's great lighting. It looks like a metallic paint coat. And there's actually a secondary step that you need to take. There's this thing called rendering. So in CAD, you can go from this kind of basic 3D model and then apply textures and different lighting like this, and actually have a reference, I guess, as a camera to render from. And you can actually create like realistic or photorealistic items. So let me, and I just have this up here. So in Blender, let me close this real quick. So this is kind of the other software I want to show you guys, Blender, which is quite cool. I'm still learning this, so I don't have a great handle on everything, but you can create these kind of cool models. In the case of BMW, I think it's M1 or M2. And you can see here where it's just in 3D. It doesn't look very good, however. And you're like, okay, I would love to see like an image of that. How do we get to the Porsche thing? So what we can do is actually render it. If my computer doesn't explode, so. And you can see it's actually going through here and rendering this BMW. And so it's going from this kind of nice 3D model and creating an actual photorealistic BMW or car from this 3D model that we created prior. So that's some of the power of Blender. A lot of people in VFX and animation do this. So even like big blockbuster movies use the software, which is free, to create some of these 3D models for the things that they're doing. And you can do animation, which I'm not very good at, and a bunch of other really cool stuff with this program. So this will take a while, so I'm not going to go through it just to render, but this is kind of an example of how you can go from this idea you have in a 3D model and then actually create a photorealistic item from that model. So back to the PowerPoint. So kind of an example of how you don't need to be a mechanical engineer to use CAD, or why it'd be important to say, like, look into using CAD, is the idea that if you have a problem in a lab, for me, let's say we had certain samples for our microscope are very hard to image, and primarily, so this is something that will come up a little bit, but we work with animals a bit to do some work with some preclinical models. And they're very hard to image sometimes just because of how they're orientated on the actual sample holder. And we needed to create a new type of sample holder in order to be able to image them better and to make sure they're more comfortable in the imaging process. So our idea was, let's create a holder that'll slot into the existing sample holder on the microscope and allow us to image these mice a little bit better. So we went forward and I actually drafted up a little sample holder in SolidWorks. And then we have a little 3D printer in our lab, and I could just plop the file into it and print out a 3D model of this idea I had. So we actually, it only took a couple hours. You can go from this kind of design process. It takes about 4 or 5 hours to print. And then we're like, okay, this is great, but we need more features. And I can just go back and really easily in SolidWorks create a secondary holder to actually help image the animals. So this is kind of an example of like why it's really important to learn CAD, but also to use it in everyday life, which is super, and it's also super fun. It's like Legos for adults. So you can see here, we needed to image the ear, and that's how I got some of those videos of the other nanoparticles in the blood. And we needed a flat surface to image on, which obviously if you just have an ear out there, it's slightly difficult. So we created this little sample holder with the anesthesia device in here to be able to image a flat surface where the actual ear was. Cool. So, oh yeah, I actually kind of already did this. Kind of 2 examples of just really awesome CAD workflows. They just be in Blender and SolidWorks. Yeah, so that's kind of just an introduction. I don't actually have that much more because without getting into actual tutorials how to use CAD. I am happy though to answer any questions if you guys have any about CAD, how I got into it, or what I do day to day in it. Michelle, I'm going to call you out if you have a question.
Okay. Wait. Okay. Where did you do your undergrad?
What was my undergrad?
Where did you do it? Like, what university did you go to?
I actually went to USC undergrad as well as doing my PhD here. Yeah, I got kind of roped into a PhD, which I was going to get into. So I guess I'll kind of get into this because this is kind of the circuitous route that I went to actually get a PhD. Yeah, so step 1, there's no direct path. So ignore everything I'm about to say. And what I mean by that is that your path to say science might be different than mine. And it also doesn't matter. every individual path is obviously unique. And I think it's actually awesome for people to take routes that aren't standard when you're going into these kind of fields. And a lot of people don't understand this, but like say you want to go into medicine, which I thought I was going to go into medicine for a long, long time. The average age of people entering med school is 28. So when you graduate from undergrad, you're 22. So what are all these people doing from 22 to 28? And a lot of them are working. And I think it's really powerful to have that kind of ability to see your future, but also see that it's okay to have things that are not linear in your path. And the main thing is, if you want to become a scientist or really any type of kind of accomplished person in any field, the first step is just to ask good questions. Is to find something you're passionate about and pursue it. And along the way, you're kind of going to see the paths that you couldn't see before. So for me, I thought I was going to go to med school for a long, long time. I came in as BME undergrad at USC, and I thought I was going to go straight BME. I was going to do all the prereqs for the MCAT and go to become a surgeon. That was my goal, and I was 18. And it's pretty silly in hindsight. And I only say that because I changed my mind so much. So let's kind of go into like how I got here. So I actually did a bit of research in high school. My high school was pretty cool in that we actually had a biological research lab there. It was a boarding school outside of Boston, and I was really interested in science, and I was kind of my first-hand exposure to like what research was, kind of like what you guys are doing in this program. Obviously, it's a bit virtual, and I'm pretty sad about that, but given the current state of affairs, it's kind of what it is. But after that, I worked in a bike shop. I was a mechanic for a long time, both in high school, and then also as an undergrad. It's kind of a summer job, something I really liked, like playing with toys and fixing things. So I entered BME undergrad, and through college, I didn't really think about doing a PhD. For me, at least, I would say value a PhD, and the only reason I didn't do it is because I thought that people with PhDs were overeducated and didn't solve practical problems. More recently, I've realized it's very much the exact opposite of what, at least for BME people, we are actively solving problems. It's something I really enjoy. So I worked in a data science startup. We did a lot of machine learning for companies like Target to kind of track customers and see how to retain them. I worked in a mechanical engineering firm that did a lot of modeling for the military, actually. We created minesweeping devices. That's where I did a lot of my CAD modeling. And then I also was shadowing a surgeon because I thought I wanted to become a surgeon. And I found it very interesting. I love the workflow of like treating people and helping patients, but in the end, it wasn't really for me. I didn't really like the pre-med track in college. And that's just my experience. And it kind of pushed me away from actually pursuing medicine as a career. So I also started a company using some 3D imaging technologies that we developed a couple of years ago. Didn't really go anywhere, but it was a cool experience to actually think about how you're actually going to create something and like manage people. I recently graduated in 2018, and I didn't initially think I was actually going to do a PhD. I thought I was going to get a master's and go straight into industry. But during undergrad, during my senior year, I joined our lab, and I really started to enjoy what we were doing. And so I worked a summer as like kind of a staff researcher in the lab, and my boss kind of slowly but surely convinced me to pursue a PhD until I started it in fall of 2019, actually. So that's kind of my path. Yeah, you can see I didn't get a real job either. I don't really have a real job right now, but that's kind of how I got here. So given all of this kind of circuitous and random kind of bubbles, do you guys have any questions or any thoughts? How many of you would you consider yourselves pre-med, or are you interested in medicine? 1, 2, Ethan? Yeah. So do you have any questions about, or what are your thoughts? What do you guys think you're going to be what major do you think you're going to be in college? I don't know how old many of you are, but I know Michelle and Alexis are both seniors now. Hannah, you raised your hand. What year are you?
I raised my hand because I didn't really have like an exact answer. I'm not really sure. That's what I'm trying to figure out right now, because I don't know what I like, and I'm kind of having trouble like finding what I'm passionate about. So, trying different things that interest me and seeing what sticks. I think is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's exactly what you need to do. You can see.
I can't hear you.
Can't hear.
Sean, you cut off. I don't know why.
Okay, I'm back, I hope.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so what I was saying is like the only way that you're gonna know if you want to do something is to try it. I thought I was gonna be a doctor, and I was doing a bunch of pre-med classes, and I hated everyone who was doing it. Then it turned me away from medicine. Yeah. Are you guys? And are you a senior?
Yeah.
Rising senior. Awesome. Yeah, I would say a big struggle for people, and this is tough. And this is tough for me when I was coming to college, was knowing exactly what I wanted to do, because it feels like, or at least I felt like, when I chose that major box when I was coming into college, like that was the be all end all. That was kind of scary for me, because I was like, I did BME as when I came in, but I really didn't know if I wanted to do that, and I felt like, okay, I'm spending a bunch of money to go to college. I better like kind of be rewarded for my investment. I will say that a lot of people, and it's a huge percentage, actually do switch majors. My partner was a mechanical engineer undergrad, and he switched over to GIS, which is kind of like mapping data science, and he really loved that. And I think having that flexibility is super important. And what's tough too is for a lot of people, including me, like my parents were like, okay, if you're going to go to college, we're spending a lot of money to go to college, you better be an engineer, be productive with your life, if you want to talk about that. But in reality, what you really need to kind of come to terms with is that when you're coming into college, like for a lot of people, it's their first experience with independence, and with that comes a lot of responsibility. But the kind of benefit of it is that you get to choose what path you want to go down, and trying a different major or not signing up to be an engineer at first is totally okay, and something that a lot of people kind of come in to do. So any other questions? I know it's a Monday.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So now that you started the PhD program, do you feel like you have an idea what you want to do afterwards, or you're just taking it slowly?
Yeah, that's another question that always comes up for me, because it never ends. Like you think you're like, okay, and this is something that I actually took issue with medicine, was that a lot of people see medicine as a direct career path. It's like, I'm going to do well in high school, I'm going to do well in college, I'm going to take the MCAT and do well, I'm going to get into good med school and be a doctor. And yeah, that is a linear process. There are things you need to do along the way, but for a lot of people that's set. And I think the scary part for me and for a lot of other people is like the unknown. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I want to do. Is it going to be fulfilling? So when I was an undergrad, I had the same questions for myself, and that's why I was doing all these different things to see what I wanted to do. Now as a PhD student, I still have those questions, because I'm still very early in the PhD program. So most people graduate between, say, year 4 and 8, somewhere in there. I'm hoping to do it in about 4 to 5. We'll see what happens, obviously. A lot of unknowns along the way. But I don't necessarily know what I want to do, because academia, which is kind of the idea of like you're doing a PhD, you might do a postdoc and then become a professor. That's kind of the realm of academia. It's very, very competitive nowadays. And you're not paid a whole lot, but it is rewarding in the sense that you get to teach, and you get to have you get to learn a lot, which is something that you don't get to do in a lot of professions. If you're in a job, say you're a software developer, you're pretty much doing software development. It's not a lot of learning along the way. So that's something where I got to kind of balance those two things. So for me, at least, I'm not super interested in academia. And again, this is early. I didn't think I was going to be a PhD student. Didn't think I was going to be a doctor. But I do think I'm very interested in solving problems. Something that kind of interests me long-term is tech consulting. I'm part of a group that actually does a bit of biotech consulting, and we take on projects from small startups right now. So that's something that very much interests me. But also for what I do, I work a lot with microscopy and imaging, and I could work for, say, a Nikon. Like Nikon has a huge life science division. It's actually bigger than their like a camera division. So that's something I could do. But when it really comes down to it, I'm not really sure what I want to do. And again, it's just doing a lot of things like this consulting group I work with to try out whether I like that or not. And you always have time. I think that's a big thing. People are always like, okay, you gotta finish your degree, you gotta get a job, you gotta become an adult, whatever that means. I don't really feel like an adult most of the time. Like I have an apartment, but is that being an adult? Like I do the dishes now, which sucks, but I mean, is that being an adult? I don't know. So I think there's always a rush to like grow up in some senses, but I think taking it a little bit slower and kind of like taking a different route than other people is actually really beneficial, especially kind of going forward. Yeah. Sorry, long-winded answer, but.
Nice.
Any other questions?
I have one more question. How would you suggest, like, I don't even know where to start a lot of times in finding things to try. So how would you suggest finding different things to try?
Well, I guess in high school, you're a little bit more limited sometimes with, say, like a club you could join or things you could do. I think one option is like if you have a robotics club or if you have like a coding club. I don't know if that's a thing anymore, but like just trying your hand at something, investing a couple months of learning into it. Another cool thing is like this is corny, but like the Lynda Learning or like LinkedIn Learning now, I guess, has a lot of cool resources to be like, okay, I'm interested in CAD. I want to like make a model of a car like I was just showing. How do I do that? Just like trying it online for a bit. And the cool part is like with Blender, like I'm interested in Blender because I want to create some like 3D renderings of like cells. So I just was like going on YouTube and learning it myself. So that's something that you can do. In college, I think that definitely changes, especially if you go to a bigger college where like for USC, for instance, the online page for the list of clubs for USC is insane. There's like aerospace clubs, they're like shooting rockets up. There's cycling clubs. There's like hackathons, all this kind of different things. And it's just kind of perusing. I mean, honestly, go on the website and peruse what kind of clubs there are and reaching out to people and being like, hey, like, can I join? Can I do that? Yeah, it's just a little bit of research on your end will go a long way. I think what people are afraid of is like, I guess, rejection in some ways. But for a lot of these clubs, like they always want new people. They want people who are excited. It doesn't matter if you have no skills, but if you're excited and you apply yourself, there's really nothing you can't do. I feel like I'm a motivational speaker, but it's somewhat true. There's some things you can't do, but you learn that along the way, and that's okay. Failure is part of the process. Yeah. Alex, do you have any questions? Yeah, you're muted.
Confused. When you say Alex, are you talking to me or the?
Oh, sorry, I meant Alex, like PhD Alex.
Oh, okay. My bad.
I have no questions. I'm glad to answer questions too. People's thoughts, questions, concerns.
Yeah. How do you stay so good looking, Alex, while doing a PhD? Do you work out?
Oh my God.
We're gonna look 10 years old after this is all done.
Yeah, seriously. I already have gray hairs. Oh wow, this is recorded. Hi YouTube. Yeah, I don't know. Fun things. In my spare time, I game a bit. I backcountry ski a lot. I have a lot of hobbies. Yeah, just gotta stay interesting, gotta have some fun.
Cool. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, no worries. Hope this was an interesting break for your Monday. Yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions. You want to learn more about CAD? Want to learn more how I have progressed as a human being slowly? Let me know. I'm always available. Yeah.
Awesome. See you guys Wednesday.
See you guys. Thanks for coming.
Bye.